guys, hCG Chica. I hope you guys are doing well. This is the third video in a series talking about how to do phase 3. The first two were focused on how to do phase 3 successfully. There was the doable way and the best way. And if you haven't seen those already, I will link to those in the post that goes with this discussion on my blog post, hcgchica.com. But I decided I wanted to follow those two discussions up with talking all about how not to do phase 3, because really you can learn some really good lessons by learning how not to do something. And if you can learn from my own mistakes and the mistakes of others, you'll be ahead of the game and perhaps can avoid some of those mistakes yourself. So anyway, I want to mention really quick, if this is the first time that you're seeing me, I want to make it clear that I've been maintaining my weight loss from hCG for 18 months now, so it's been a whole year and a half. I'm now at 15% body fat, and out of my 5 rounds of hCG, I have 4 that were successful. So the point is, though, we are all imperfect, and I've made my own mistakes along the way as well. And so today, that's kind of what this discussion is about, is talking about my own mistakes when it came to one of my phase 3s, and how we can, learn from that and hopefully, avoid some pain and grief for you guys. So let's get into talking about the not going to work way for phase 3. Doing phase 3 this way involves eating starches and sugars, thinking that you're done with the diet and that you can kind of go back to eating what you used to eat, not making corrections when you could have, and not paying attention to your weight. So those are the 4 mistakes that I made in one of my phase 3s. It probably sounds funny to detail it out that way, because none of us would ever consciously choose to I'm going to do phase 3 this way, by ignoring it and pretending it doesn't matter. We obviously wouldn't consciously choose that. But the thing is it happens. Somewhere on this planet at this very second, there's most likely somebody who started phase 3 but is eating some toffee-covered almonds. And the reason that I know that is because I was that very person a couple of years ago. It was actually almost 3 years ago now. It was the end of my second round, October 2011. The round itself was rocky anyways. I ended up cheating a lot on that round, which that's a story for another day. But let's just say that things were not on in my head or my heart that round, and that ended up getting carried over into phase 3. So talking about my own epic hCG setback, in this case, when it came to P3, the only P3 that turned out like this, but in short, I managed to gain back 14 pounds of my 16-pound net loss from my second round. So my second round, my net loss was 16 pounds. I had gained 3.6 pounds loading, so that brings it up to a little over 19 pounds. And in 9 weeks following that round, I gained back 14 pounds. So I pretty much the round was basically a wash. I gained back almost all of that weight very quickly. In fact, I have my little stats breakdown on the article, and you can check it out for yourself. So my LDW for round 2 was 129.6, which was after almost 40 days on the diet. And then during that 9 weeks, I gained 14 pounds back and ended up at 140, was it 143 or I think 143-ish. So just a huge waste. So July 24th, 2011, I was 129.6, and then by mid-September, the same year, I was already back to 143, right around where I was after round 1. So a huge waste of, several months in the 6-week round that I did. So what exactly happened? I'm going to detail out for you guys all the things that went wrong, the poor choices that I made, and kind of analyze those for you guys so that hopefully you could avoid it too. Or if you're kind of already in that boat where you're doing phase 3 the wrong way, hopefully this can help you analyze your own situation to maybe figure out where you're going wrong and how you can fix it for the next time. So what I did wrong. Here's the basic timeline into the abyss. Loaded on sugars and carbs after a nice long record of eating clean. didn't feel well on the round itself, and instead of quitting early, stayed on and just kept cheating. 3, did not wait the 72 hours to start P3. 4, basically pretended it wasn't P3. 5, found myself in a compromising situation at the start of P3 that I wasn't ready to handle, and my willpower totally caved. And finally, 6, gave up, went back to binging. So basically, for a good phase 3, avoid all of the above. But I'm going to talk a little bit more in detail now about those specific things, where my head was at, what led up to them, to help you guys. So let's talk about the first point, which was loading for hCG with plenty of sugars and carbs. Now, some people can load this way by eating just whatever they want, whether it's cookies or cake or just anything that has both fat and sugar and carbs, and it's fine for them and it doesn't come back to bite them in the behind. However, that was not the case for me. So I actually did not have an eating disorder for my entire life until about a year before I started the hCG protocol when I was about 30 years old. And I don't know, I might be one of the few people who had an eating disorder start later in life. I think people have different perceptions on what they think a true eating disorder is, but I feel that I did develop an actual binge eating disorder when I was about 30 years old. And I'm talking about consuming, entire packages of cookies, 3,500 calories in half an hour, and having to do that daily, and being addicted to that. So to me, I think that that's an eating disorder because there's something not right about eating that way on a daily basis, and I couldn't seem to stop myself. Part of the reason that I feel that started for me was because eating became one of the only things left in my life that was still enjoyable and brought a feeling of happiness, because I had developed a chronic illness that I didn't know what it was for a long time. I finally came to the conclusion that it was Lyme disease. That's just my own personal feeling about it. But because of the symptoms that I got from this disease, I could no longer do any of the things that I used to love to do. I used to love to go hiking and backpacking. I did all kinds of painting of furniture. I had a lot of active hobbies, and all of that got taken away from me. I just no longer had the energy or the ability to do those things anymore. I would just be so exhausted and so tired that I just couldn't do those things anymore. So it was really a depressing time. And as a result, it really was like eating was one of the only things that I could still do that brought a sense of enjoyment into my life. And so I started doing it more, and especially when it came to sugary foods. It just having that yummy taste, and it brought a sense of relief after I would consume a large amount of it. So that's kind of how that started. So my first round of hCG actually helped me to break that daily cycle of binging that I had gotten into, where I would have 3,500 calories of mostly sugar and stuff like that. It helped me to break that. And so from the start of my first round to the start of my second round, I had this whole 3-month period where I didn't binge at all. I didn't have sugary foods. I think I had, the P2 fruits, but that was it. I was eating a very clean lifestyle. By the time P3 came, the break that I took from hCG, I wasn't even eating fruit because it was the no starches, no sugars phase. And so as a result, all my cravings went away. Just that feeling of being a slave to having to eat a certain way was gone, and I was feeling really good. Now, when I loaded for my second round, I didn't really give much thought to what I was going to eat. Even though I had been eating clean and not eating sugars and starches for 3 months, I kind of figured that eating some sugar again for a couple days wasn't going to be such a big deal. In fact, I still remember calling on the phone and ordering a very large slice of my favorite chocolate cake from this Greek restaurant, and driving all the way across town just to pick it up and eat it in my car. And of course, that was only a small portion of what I ended up eating for that load. Also that round, I chose to load for 3 days. And I'm not completely completely against loading for 3 days, but you have to ask yourself, why am I choosing, or why am I considering a 3-day load? And I actually have a whole video and article on that I'll link to, because for me, I didn't do a 3-day load because I truly felt like, oh, I need this. It was really, to me, an excuse to be able to eat more of whatever I wanted for another day, which in retrospect was a poor choice. So anyway, as a result, I ended up eating a lot of sugar and carbs for 3 full days while I loaded, that I hadn't done anything like that for 3 months. And what I feel like it did, it triggered my binge eating mentality again. So by the time I started P2, that second round, I found it very difficult, and I was struggling with cravings really badly. I was struggling with the urge to binge daily. I started feeling really depressed. So anyway, it set the stage for a very terrible round. And that was just one of the poor choices that I made. But it really just was not a good way to start things off for me. Now, once I recovered, from all the craziness of that and analyzed everything that happened, I basically resolved never to do that again. And ever since that time, my following 3 rounds, I never used sugar or carbs as part of my loading process. And everything has worked well, since then. So that's just what I personally had to do to fix that problem. Just to give you another example, one of my interviewees, episode 12, Elkie, she's not actually a sugar addict, but she said her first round, and she can compare it with the later rounds where she loaded clean. Her first round, she loaded what we call dirty, which is with sugar and carbs. And she said she felt so horrible the first week of hCG because her body was cleansing and feeling so crappy from all the crappy food she put into her. And so anyway, compared with later when she loaded clean, she said she felt so much better. And the reason that this is significant to phase 3 even is because if you start off on the wrong foot and you set the stage and you make things a struggle for yourself, it can kind of carry on and cause P3 to be difficult for you as well, because there's so much involved with our minds and our hearts, with this process. And so, like she said, for her, it made it very difficult. When you make the protocol difficult for yourself, there's just a lot more likelihood that you'll cheat or that you'll give up early. So that's just kind of one more example how loading with sugar and carbs, in our case, was a poor choice. I want to move on next to the second wrong decision I made, which was I didn't feel well on the round itself, and instead of quitting early, I chose to keep trying to stick it out, and I just kept cheating really frequently on hCG. Now, this is another one of those unfortunate mistakes where I look back now and I realize what I should have done. It wasn't just the loading on sugar thing that ruined everything. That was one part of it. The other part was that my health wasn't too good at that point, and I kind of wasn't aware of it. My health has really fluctuated a lot for several years, and you guys probably know what I'm talking about. If any of you have a chronic illness like Hashimoto's or Lyme disease or chronic fatigue syndrome or adrenal fatigue, you have periods where you feel a little better and you have periods where you feel worse, and it can come on at any time, seemingly. So what I found was, as I started this round and I had loaded with sugars, of course, I just was not feeling well. And I think my Lyme symptoms were most likely acting up. And so I was just having a hard time. I actually started feeling really depressed. And when you're depressed, you don't care. You don't care anymore. I got to this point on the round where I didn't even care about being thin anymore or being healthy, or I didn't care because I was so depressed. Just living was difficult. And so I wasn't worried about getting into size 6 pants at that point. And yet I still kept trying to stick to the diet though. It's like every morning I'd wake up and think like maybe I should stop the round because I'm just not feeling it. But then I would end up doing my shot anyway and saying, okay, well, today's a new day. Maybe I can handle it today. Because of course there's still that deep down inner desire to lose weight. But the thing was, is I just ended up cheating a lot, or I was eating foods that weren't on protocol, that weren't a healthy choice, that any sane person would know, like, okay, that's not a healthy choice. So even though I might be kind of trying to stay within the 500 calories or maybe, 600 or 700, instead of eating my protein and vegetables, it's like I was trying out these weird like fiber cookies that were like sweetened with sugar alcohols that supposedly had really low net carbs, and so I'd eat like 4 or 5 of those, and because that took up most of my calories, then I wouldn't eat vegetables or meat. So it's just very poor choices. So it's like on the outside, like if you looked at the numbers, it might seem as if I was going, staying within the confines of the protocol, but really I wasn't, and it really wasn't healthy. So all of that is what happened during my second round. And, now looking back, I feel like I should have been a little more in tune with my body and realized that I wasn't well and that I should stop. I should have stopped that round early. That's really what I should have done. There was no getting back on board because my body was not in a good state, and mentally I wasn't in a good state as a result. And so I feel like I could have saved myself some damage if I had quit that round early and waited till a later time. It's possible that if I had done that, if I had quit early, then I may have had the willpower after that to do phase 3 properly. But because I kept pushing the envelope on phase 2 and kept trying to stick to it, even though my body wasn't able to really handle it, it was kind of like by the time phase 3 came, I basically flipped out. Like I had exhausted all of my inner strength, all of my willpower. It was like just gone. And so when phase 3 came, there was nothing there inside of me to rise up and do the right thing. It was just like everything, I just was totally spent inside. I felt so weak, so yucky, so depressed. And so when phase 3 came, it was just all over. Which leads me to my next point, which was I did not wait the 72 hours to start phase 3. So there is a good reason for pretty much sticking to the VLCD and those certain list of foods during the 72 hours after your last injection or your last dose of hCG. Technically, the idea is that it takes 72 hours for the hCG to leave your system. When hCG is in your system, your body is a lot more sensitive both to calories and to fats, in my opinion. So, as a result, if you add in higher calories and fats before that 72-hour period is up, you can gain fat back much more quickly than if there was no hCG in your system. That's my opinion on that. So, I do think in some cases, in my case, definitely this is true, as the 72-hour period goes on, you do have to kind of slightly raise your calories as the hCG is leaving your system, because I find myself getting a lot more hungry. And that I think is okay. But in my case, I didn't do that in this phase 3. In this phase 3, I just kind of pretended it didn't exist, and I just started eating P3. It's like, oh, I'm just gonna forget the 72 hours. I'm hungry. It's P3, and I just basically started eating P3 style, eating fats, and I had some pretty huge gains that I was then trying to correct a little bit right out the gate. So I feel that sticking to P2 foods and no fats is very important during that 72-hour period. In the very near future, I'm going to make an article talking about specifically that 72-hour period and how you do sometimes need to increase your calories a little bit. But I do think that the foods and not incorporating fats during that 72-hour period is important. And that's something that I didn't do that particular round. And that brings me to the last thing that I did wrong, which was gave up and went back to binging. I want to point out a little spot in my notes I'm showing you guys that I had made. I kept my own little handwritten log of my hCG journey. And if you'll notice in my notes, it says 8 half-gallon of ice cream, Rice Krispie treats, box. Now, yes, you did read that correctly. The girl who now lives on daily bunches of kale salads did that. And that was not the only time. It just happens to be the only day I wrote it down in my notes on that page, because as you can see, the following day I was trying to follow it up by correcting it by eating clean. That didn't last too long because mentally I just was not ready to make any long-term changes. But basically, I fell back into my binge eating disorder at that time. So it spiraled out of control pretty quickly in phase 3, and for 9 weeks following that round, I kind of just went back to eating whatever I wanted, and I was binging again on sugary foods, and it was obviously a not very good time for me in that part of my journey. So with this whole story told, I want to talk about how a lack of knowledge can end up equaling a lack of taking responsibility. So I'm not blaming all that transpired on something outside of myself, but what I realized was that my lack of knowledge about how things work in our body and how our bodies interact with foods and hormones and all of that stuff, my lack of knowledge about that ended up causing me to make some poor choices that I didn't know were poor choices for me personally, that ended up kind of putting me in the passenger seat, essentially, of a vehicle that was headed off of a cliff. And I didn't have control because those poor choices kind of led me down that path where I was essentially just a passenger. But coming to understand what set off my binging, the choices that I made prior that led up to everything falling apart, learning about what affected that helped me to then put myself more in the driver's seat so that I could actually direct where I wanted to go. And that really did work. It's amazing how knowing what causes something to happen or what doesn't cause something to happen can give you so much more power and control over the situation. Okay, so that was my doom and gloom story about phase 3. I've had 5 phase 3s, and that's the only one that turned out so horribly. So the good news is that, even if you're a person who has a phase 3 like that, perhaps going on right now, or in your past, and you're considering future P3s and you're scared, know that just because it's happened to you once doesn't mean that has to be your outcome next time. All my P3s since that time went well. They were successful, but only because I actually learned from the mistakes that I made. And I made different choices on following rounds. And so it is important to do that if you want a different outcome. Better yet, if you haven't done a phase 3 yet, hopefully you can actually learn from my mistakes and not make any yourself. That would save you a lot of time and grief. So, that's kind of why I'm sharing this experience. Just to show you guys that being imperfect and making mistakes is not saying who you are as a person. It's what you learn from those mistakes and what you do over time that really shows your character and that you can make changes. I never would have thought, I'm sorry, I'm starting to lose my voice. This is my second long video that I've been recording today. But I never would have thought when I was binging on a whole half gallon of ice cream or a whole carton of Chips Ahoy, a whole package of Chips Ahoy, chewy chocolate chip cookies. That was my favorite, by the way, which are like highly processed, and I loved them. They were my favorite. Or a box, or a package of Oreos. I never would have thought that someday I would be craving a raw kale salad, a head of kale, like on a daily basis, and that I would no longer think about cookies or ice cream. There's no way I could have even have fathomed that. I wouldn't have believed you if you told me that. But that's where I'm at today. I crave raw kale, and I have a whole head of kale almost every single day. I haven't had any ice cream in, I don't know, at least 2 years probably. I do make healthy phase 3 smoothies, so those are kind of my replacement, and I do think making replacements is important. I haven't had a cookie in years as well, and I don't think about it. The point is that I don't think about it. I don't sit around like wishing I could have a cookie or ice cream, because those cravings are gone. It's out of my life, and I have other things, other foods that are healthier that I love now and that I crave. And if I can get to that point from where I started, you can get to that point too. I know it can be hard to believe, and part of it is that you're not going to start out thinking to yourself like, oh, my goal is to crave kale someday. I definitely wasn't thinking that. So you have to make your goals realistic as well. So you don't need to be thinking to yourself now like, oh, someday I need to crave kale instead of ice cream. You don't need to think that. For now, just start out replacing your unhealthy trigger foods with healthier versions. Make those P3 smoothies. Make those healthier low-carb versions of baked treats using, almond flour and flaxseed meal and chia seeds and all that stuff. And, you might use some of those sugar alcohols at first. And as time goes by and you make those gradual changes, your body will change. Your cravings will change. Your taste buds will change. And you may just find yourself not even needing those replacement baked goods anymore. I did start out doing some of that stuff myself, and over time I just found that I don't know, I ate healthier and healthier, and my body started craving those healthier foods, and so that's what I have ended up doing. So you guys really can do this. The last thing I wanted to mention to you guys is for getting back on track. If you have found yourself in this scenario where you're doing phase 3 the not gonna work way and you want to get out of it, I'm gonna link you to a video and an article that I've already made talking about help I royally messed up on phase 3. That's what I'm calling it. And so I'll link you to that series in the article. As well, starting off on the right track in P3, I will link you to the 2 articles on the doable way and the best way to do phase 3. And just to get a little background on exactly why, boy, my voice is really going now, I'm sorry you guys, on why P3 is so important. You can check out a couple other articles that I've already done. It was a series on the purpose of phase 3, which was stabilizing your weight, readjusting your digestion, and becoming aware of food sensitivities. So I've linked to those in the article as well. The reason I'm looking down is because I have my paper right here with my notes. But it can be really helpful to understand like what the point of P3 is, because that can help you to take it more seriously. So anyway, that's it for that story. So anyway, it's your turn now. Do you guys have a P3 story, good or bad, that you want to share? I would love to hear a good P3 experience or a bad P3 experience, because you know what? The more people that give their input about how things did or didn't work for them, it's so helpful to everybody watching these videos or reading these articles, because it's just that much more input from other sources that help them figure out what's best for them or convince them of one way to go or another. So anyway, thank you guys for watching or listening. I have all of my videos on iTunes now as well as MP3s for those of you who like to just listen. And so it's hard for me to keep the vocabulary exactly right. I'm always saying something about a video, but if you're listening to it on iTunes, obviously you're not watching a video, but oh well, you guys know what I mean. So anyway, I hope you guys have a good day. You can find me on Facebook, hCG Chica, Instagram, hCG Chica. Those are the best places. And of course, my blog, hcgchica.com. If you want to be kept up to date with my latest videos and posts, the best thing really to do is to actually sign up for my email list, which you can do on my website, hcgchica.com. Because the thing is, with these different social media avenues, they're really starting to take a lot more control over who gets shown what posts. And so basically, essentially, a lot of the people who've liked my Facebook page don't see my posts anymore. That's just how the Facebook algorithm is now. So if you really want to stay up to date, just get on my email list. All right, you guys, take care. Bye.